Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I have the privilege to be the first on my feet after that historic 400-meter final in Paris that we just witnessed. I believe all of Barbados can agree that we are tremendously proud of Sade Williams this afternoon. The member for St. Michael South and I were pacing back and forth. Sir, you were witness to the nerves and to the shared heart, to the admiration and the utmost respect that we have for that young woman who has been the epitome of focus and grace and poise and excellence throughout her career to date, and we know that it will long continue. And I want to say through you, sir, to Barbados, that we do still have a hero. 7th fastest woman in the world in the 400-meter. I'll take it, sir, I will take it. I rise, sir, on the matter before us, this policy on aging, struck, sir, by the cohesion and the continuity that this government continues to demonstrate and to manifest in our policy. Sir, policy coherence, we learn in development, is often a difficult thing. We know that governments sometimes work in silos. We know that sometimes it can be difficult for different ministries and different arms of a system of governance to come together and to make sure that everything that it does follows from a particular blueprint and a stated ideology and philosophy. I am satisfied, and I am one who does not believe in patting oneself on the back. We are here to do a job, and we are doing it. But I am satisfied that this government has, since 2018, shown an understanding and an expression of policy coherence, that there is a particular path, there's a particular journey, but there's a particular destination that we want to reach, and that whether it be youth, sports and community development, health and wellness, transport works, water resources, whatever area, people empowerment and elder affairs, that we make sure that we are in step and in sync. I am reminded, sir, of the population policy that I had the honor to lead in this place some weeks ago, debate on which I had the honor to lead, which aligns completely with this policy on aging. And in fact, when one reads this policy, it is clear that it is based on evidence. It is one of the other things that many governments often find hard to do, which is to actually relate the things that it does to what is happening on the ground. Not because you saw one thing somewhere, but because we do the research, we talk to people, we hear what people are saying, we see what people are experiencing, we feel what they want to express, and policy flows from that. It flows from a rigor of information. This information comes from the population and housing census. It comes, no doubt, from some of the administrative data that the agencies in the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs collect. And perhaps, sir, that is where I want to start. Because one of the important things that I think that we sometimes overlook is that in the carrying out of the duties of officers in the field, whether it be National Assistance Board or National Disabilities Unit or welfare, that work itself gathers information that must then further inform policy. And I think, for example, of the Community Eldercare program. And the fact that, as I sit in my constituency office in Tweedside Road every Wednesday afternoon, and speak with residents of St. Michael South Central, sometimes the people who walk into that office are people who work in the community elder care program or other programs of the ministry, and they come and they say, you know, one of the things I have to go back to the ministry and report is that I am seeing certain things in certain households that I don't have immediate responsibility for, but that are causing me concern. And that this older person that I take care of has certain needs and deprivations in other areas. I recall that one of the things that I recommended, that I discussed with the Honourable Member for St. Michael South, is the extent to which we are capturing that information and documenting that information. That there is a way to come back to the ministry or to the department and to be able to report, not just that I was here for this number of hours, but that I was here for this number of hours, and that this has been the experience of this older person. This is a report not just on what I've done today, but on some key indicators of how that person is living. But that's how we collect information. And that information has to further inform policy, like the policy on aging. But sir, I want to have reference to the 8 pillars that were identified in the situational analysis that was done, and then that were further pursued in this policy. Financial and economic security, social security, which is really the extent to which people are protected with pensions and social protection and so on. Health and health systems, as the Honourable Member pointed out. The physical and built environment and the social environment. The legislation that supports all of these. How are we investing in long-term care? And then, what is the emergency plan for dealing with the particular vulnerability that is represented often in aging populations? I want to touch, sir, on just 4 of these quickly, and then to look at 1 or 2 of the cross-cutting considerations that the policy also highlights. I think one of the first things to acknowledge is the question of care. And the Honourable Member who led the debate said very correctly that we have to consider what is the level of investment in care that the state can support. What is the level of state investment, and what is the level of family investment? The two have to complement each other. And when we consider what is the level of state investment in care that a government can support, sir, I started an exercise that, if he permits me, I will now pass over to the Honourable Member for St. Michael South, because I think that it benefits him more to complete. But last night I was going through the policy and going through some of our numbers and started to compute the level of investment in care that this government makes as a percentage of GDP. I confess that I didn't finish the exercise. But what was instructive is that I had not yet finished and was already above the Latin American and Caribbean average for investment in care as a percentage of GDP. It means, sir, that this Barbados government is batting above the average for how much we invest in care already. And I'm sure that when the Honourable Member finishes the computation and comes back to this honourable place, we will be well above the average. Why do I focus on this? It is to support the point that he made that we, even as we continue to strengthen those investments, we have the community elder care program, We have expanded welfare benefits, increased welfare benefits in terms of the amount. We have investments in community programs that young people and people who need specific kinds of care can benefit from. And the list goes on. I know that as part of BERT, the first Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan, we were documenting and computing investment in care. And it strikes me that we have to continue, because I dare say that the record of this government on care investments is perhaps the best and the highest since independence. And it is no small thing, but what does it mean? It means that there is a balance of investment that any government has to have. So there's social investment, but there's investment in infrastructure. There is investment in health and wellness. There are all kinds of other draws, national security. There are all kinds of other draws that we have to manage and to balance. And it means then that that conversation, this national conversation from which this policy benefited, becomes more and more important. So it is one of the reasons why in the Ministry of Industry through Export Barbados, we have also started to build out and are near completion of the build out on daycare facilities and elder care facilities at Pelican in Bridgetown. And this comes from a legacy and an up till now unfulfilled commitment that is about to be fulfilled, to be able to provide care facilities where people work and have the expression of their lives. And for many, many years, women who were working in what we then called industrial parks, and probably what many people still do call industrial parks, who are working in that area, found that there was no care nearby. That when it came to daycare facilities, there was no quick option for them to be able to make sure their children were safe and cared for, but not just safe and cared for. What are we doing at the facility at Pelican? We know, and the minister responsible for education transformation, the ministers responsible for education transformation would tell you that one of the most important investments you can make in education comes from 0 to 3 years old. And so one of the things we're taking the opportunity to do is to make sure that those young people and those older people who will be benefiting from those care facilities at Pelican are also learning. So for us, digital inclusion in the very early years and also in the very later years is tremendously important. And when I come to talk about the issue of elder years, income and earning capacity, we'll see how and why. But at those facilities, it is not just about having people there and watching them. There was a time when that was what care was. People would say, I ain't got nobody to keep the child. And really what they meant was to make sure that the child survived the 8 hours. But we know it has to be more intentional than that. And that it has to be about what are the skills and knowledge that you are imparting and facilitating? What is the play that you are helping children engage in? What is the social interaction that you are helping older people engage in? Sir, we see so many people who retire from their formal jobs and go home. The people who have the greatest prospect of living well and surviving long are people who are able to stay active, notwithstanding the other health indicators. People who have social networks, people who have things to do, people who have things to look forward to. The member for St. John spoke about the swimming program that his ministry put on. And I turned to the member for St. Michael South and I said, boy, Thank goodness for that program, because my mother loved that program. And the length of Barbados, everywhere I go, people see me and say, how are you, mommy? And I don't even know that these people know my mother. And I say, she's doing well. And I look at them, you know, to get further information on how they know her. And they say, she swims with me. A whole network of older people who have found community in this swimming program. So I put any member for St. John on notice that please allow my mother to have some further recreation through the program. But these things are important indicators of health and wellness and longevity, and we know this. And so the facilities at Pelican will include training in technology, because the other part of this conversation is that the digital divide is not just what is happening between countries in the global north and the global south, and the fact that we don't have as much capacity and compute power and so on. The digital divide also happens in countries where those of us who have not grown up in the AI and the quantum computing generation, people who are 60 years, 65 years and older, who don't naturally pick up a device and know what to do with it, stand to be left out if we are not intentional about including them. And so just like we are including technology training and digital literacy in the programs at Pelican, that mirrors what the member for St. Michael South is doing at the facilities that his ministry is responsible for, to make sure that those kinds of programs are also included, and also what the Barbados Association of Retired Persons and others are helping to support in the country. So digital inclusion among the elderly is a very, very important thing. But I want to make this further point, sir. We are about to move to the next step of the Trident ID, which is to have the ID on your mobile phone, so that the card becomes less relevant, your ID is loaded on your phone, and you are able to do your business by having a validated address associated with your ID that is loaded on your phone. But the interesting thing about the Trident ID is that those who were most interested and most, I don't want to say compliant, but who were most interested in the uptake, who moved earliest, was the population 50 and over. Population 50 and over, overwhelmingly compared to the population 49 and below, were interested in the uptake of the ID. They were interested in having this digital ID. Why? Because I can sit at home and have services available to me without having to leave, without having to, especially older people who have mobility issues. So digital transformation is extremely relevant and timely and important as part of a policy on aging. And we have to make sure that when we talk about digital inclusion, we are not just creating access to services for older people, but also that we are including them in the industry of technology. So, sir, that brings me to the issue of what economists and others are now calling elder years income. The issue of income and how you can live and what you are earning as you get older. Sir, a constituent of mine came to me some time ago. She is over 80 years old, but you would not believe it. She came to me, lovely, poised, gracious lady, and she said that she was interested in working. She's interested in working in part because she needs to supplement her income, but in part because she wants to. And she said to me, you know, I know that you look at my, well, I have to look at the ID number, not at the face, to know, because, I mean, she did not at all. The most she looked like she could be is probably 62. Over 80 years old. And she wants to work. She actually needs to work. So I recall when I also had the privilege to be part of the team that was looking at the pension restructuring, that one of the options that we considered, because the consultations that we had raised it as an issue, was the extent to which we could introduce a partial pension alongside or in situations where people continue to work, choose, let me say clearly, where people choose to continue to work or even to pick up a different job after some years of retirement. And we know that there are people who choose to do that. There are people who pick up a hobby in retirement and realize, well, hang on, I could make some money from this. But then they are constrained in that choice because they will lose their pension. And one of the things that we considered very much was the extent to which in the next cycle of pension reform, we might look at the issue of a partial pension that comes alongside older people who choose to work. Let it not be said that this government is telling people that they have to work in perpetuity. But there are people who want to, and there are people who remain productive and want to contribute. But there are also people, regrettably, who feel like they have no choice. They are at or past retirement, and they do not have enough of an income. We aim to address that similarly through the pension reform, because one of the things that is very important to understand is the need to make contributions and to ensure that a person has enough contributions to be able to earn a pension. But we also have to have a frank conversation about what people do with their income in later years. And we discussed it during the debate on population policy. There are households, talking about dependency ratio, when we talk about dependency ratio, we normally mean the extent to which a family depends on the people of working age in the household to earn. But there is almost a reverse dependency ratio, where there are households that are dependent on pensions, the pensions of older people. There are many households where it is a pension that was sending students to UE before 2018, when a former Democratic Labour Party government removed free tertiary education. There were pensions sending young people to the University of the West Indies and Community College and SJPI. If my pension has to send to school children, if my pension has to buy groceries for a household full of people, then how am I able to do the things that I need to do as an older person? How am I able to buy medication? How am I able to pay for the kind of recreation? You know, we have a program in St. Michael South Central where one of the things that we do is to help support recreational activities of some of our older people. So that if you're doing a sewing class and you need some sewing items, we want to make sure that your brain remains engaged, because your brain remaining engaged is one of the best indicators of a positive outcome. If you get ill and have to be in hospital, you have something to go back to, you have something to live for. And like it or not, that is a fact. That is a fact that doctors are now documenting. And so while we have people who want to work and choose to work, we also have people who work because they have to. And the question is, how do we consider the structure of our pensions and our pension system such that those people who want to work can, but also how do our families and communities add to what the government is investing in to, as a community, support elderly populations, because that is what it comes to. When the member for St. Michael South says this has to be a national conversation, that's what the national conversation is about. What is each of us doing to make sure that we are caring for the elderly in our communities? But Sir, others said it before me. Coming to the question of health, wellness, and longevity, that the policy speaks to. The health question as it relates to aging does not start when a person is 50 or 60 or 70 years old. And sir, I really feel that it is high time that we get serious as a country about having frank conversations about health and wellness. I'm going to say something that people may consider controversial. There is a narrative that it is expensive to eat well. No. It is the case that foods that have lower nutritional value are often some of the cheapest foods that you can find. But I want to offer a different consideration. And it has to do with something as simple as portion control. The experts tell you to shop the perimeter of the supermarket. I mean, in our case, shop the market. All of the highly packaged foods that we think that we need, we often don't need. So that if we buy some sweet potatoes or some, I also think that we've overblown the difference in health benefits between sweet potatoes and white potatoes, because sweet potatoes are good, high in fiber, very good. White potatoes are healthy. White potatoes are healthy, right? I know people that think that rice is not healthy. I've seen a woman stop at a food truck and say, I don't do the lot of rice, I can buy macaroni pie. No, rice is a grain. It is healthy. Even white rice is healthy. A portion of food in general is the palm of your hand. A portion of sweet potato is 4 ounces. That could fit in my hand. I say all this to say that we need to start a national conversation where we understand that food is meant to nourish us. It's not a hobby. It's not a pastime, right? And there are things that we will enjoy eating. But the member for St. Michael South knows that when Kaduma is coming, he's eating 4 ounces of sweet potatoes. I see him. But what I'm saying is this. I'm not going to say that produce cannot come to be expensive, and that this government has also addressed that issue by making sure that we are able to monitor prices on some of the key things that people eat. It may be time to look at that basket of goods, to insist on certain more healthful products being included. But there's a lot that we can do if we only understand how to do it, which is to understand that, most of us are no longer out in the fields working and burning 5,000 calories a day. Many of us barely move when the day comes. And if we're not intentional about getting up and walking or going to the gym or stretching, we may not move at all for a month or a year. So we don't need those 5,000 calories that our forefathers, that our foreparents needed. Some of these fixes, some of these issues can be addressed long before we get to the place where the health considerations become a financial consideration for ourselves and our families and the state. And some of the issues are simpler than we believe. As a government, we will continue to invest in finding ways to make natural, healthful food more affordable. That is a commitment that we have made and we continue to make. But similarly, I also think that there is a role to be played by those institutions of the state and others who are leading the conversation on nutrition. It is movement as well, but I'll tell you this. You can't outrun a bad diet. You can't outrun a large pizza. Your nutrition, your health profile is probably 80% your nutrition, what you put into your mouth. And you have to keep moving because your body has to understand how to move. You know what is one of the biggest risks to people as they get older? Losing your balance and your flexibility and being unable to break a fall. Do you remember St. Michael Self experienced that in one of his team building exercises? I'm sorry, I should not laugh. He's well, he is well. No. But the truth is, sir, that there are classes now that are telling people, teaching people as they get older how to fall. Can you imagine? So because we haven't been working on moving around and on our balance and our flexibility, now we have to learn how to fall. We have an opportunity here, sir, to make the conversation about health and wellness and longevity one that is more accessible, one where we show people that actually it is not as difficult as we think. And while this government continues to invest in making healthful food more affordable, that there's also a role for families and individuals and communities to play. It comes back to investing in supporting facilities and making sure that communities are walkable and so on. That new developments, when they go up, also have parks and have walking paths and biking paths. That's important. So that when these developments come to the Ministry of Planning, the Ministry of Planning needs to say, but where are people going to walk? Where are people going to run? But we also have to take some responsibility. So the final point I want to make relates to another matter that was raised during this debate, which has to do with, the reference was made to retirement planning, but it's really about estate planning. Estate planning. It is a question of security of land and housing tenure, and just a question of financial and economic security as people get older. People remark on the number of derelict buildings around Barbados. Many of these derelict homes are in such a state because of estate issues, because an individual has not put together a will, has not put things in place to say, well, I want this property to pass to the member for St. Andrew. I want this part of my estate to pass to the member for St. Thomas. And then when the individual passes, there's no clarity on what should happen to this property. But not only that, the property then can't be used as an asset by the family for any other reason. And so a lot of the insecurity that we see when it comes to insecurity of dwelling and of land tenure has to do with that. One of the best things that we can do for our families and our communities is to make sure that your will, when I say your will, what is your will to be done on your passing is documented and made known. So yes, it is about retirement and making sure that you have enough for retirement. But that is not just about you, but that is also about the question of intergenerational fairness. You know, there are many people who believe that, and perhaps it is a holdover from our colonial past, that having children is an insurance policy. Now, I want to make very clear what I'm about to say. I have a responsibility to my family, to my parents, and to my family to make sure that I am responsible for their care. That there is no way that I could be alive and working in this country and my parents could not be receiving the appropriate and adequate care. But I want to make this further point, that if I fail to put things in place for my life cycle, for the years that I am alive, I am passing a burden on to future generations. And I want us to think about that. Because sometimes when we look at the difference between different kinds of communities around the world, what has made the difference between the levels of success in one community and the levels of success in another? The question of intergenerational wealth is not necessarily about leaving something behind. Ideally, yes, you can. But not leaving any encumbrance, if we can help it. Some of us cannot. But those of us who can do better owe it to future generations to make sure that we do not pass on that encumbrance, that responsibility to them, if we can help it. We talk a lot about intergenerational equity, and it's a principle that I very much believe in. Because while I want my niece, if something happens to me and I can't do any better, I would want my niece to care for me. But at the same time, I also feel it is my responsibility to leave behind the wherewithal for her to do so. I can do it. There's some who can't. But I do believe that the issue of estate planning, access to housing, leaving assets and making sure that your assets are well preserved for generations to come is also a consideration that we have to take. So I want to end on the question of one of the cross-cutting issues that was raised in the policy, and I'm very glad to see, so I spent many years looking at questions of gender equity in my work as an economist. And I have to say that when I reflect on the conversations that we have as a government, remember Professor Michael South made reference to it in his remarks. The conversations that we have as a government while coming up with policy in response to what we hear and see and feel from people. When I was a practitioner on the outside of government, I would have loved to believe that governments were having these conversations. Let me explain myself. Many of us who worked supporting or trying to support governments in policy spent so much time trying to get governments to understand the role of gender in these issues. And this is a government that asks 4 very key questions as a matter of course. What is the public purpose of a policy? What is it for? What will it do? Why are we doing it? What problem does it solve? What is the public purpose? What is the public mischief? Is there something about what we're doing that somebody can take advantage of and use in a way that we would not want? What is the public purpose? What is the public mischief? How can technology and innovation support or enhance what we're doing? That's a question that I often have to answer in the Ministry of Technology, that I'm happy to answer. But number 4, the most important, who are the groups of people? Which are the groups of people that stand to benefit disproportionately or suffer disproportionately if this policy were to be introduced? It is a very simple consideration. It is not high policy, but it is effective. If you apply that lens with respect to gender, with respect to age, with respect to geographical provenance, with respect to ethnicity, with respect to so many other things, you get to the heart of the question. So when it comes to gender and aging, when I started doing policy work in the Caribbean, I went to a particular country, my first project, and I was asked to help that particular government understand some things that were going on in the country at the time. And one of those things was that that government found that there were so many men who were being left out in their elderly years. I mean, when I say left out, in this particular country, literally, who were more likely to be homeless, who were in very large numbers at that time, who were more likely to be left in hospital, for example, and nobody come back and care for them. the percentage of men versus women who experienced this kind of abandonment and deprivation in the years 60, 65 and above, I mean, it was shocking. But the reason really was that many of those men had what we would call visiting relationships, right? They didn't belong to any particular household or family unit. And so when it came to their older years, because they hadn't associated with a family structure, people were like, well, yeah, I know you, you look familiar, but you don't concern me. And that was the challenge that that country was facing at the time in overwhelming numbers. And the member for St. Michael South is reminding us that this is a challenge that is also faced in Barbados. And so it means that, again, just like with the health question, the question of how gender impacts aging and what are the gendered dynamics, what are the social dynamics that impact aging, doesn't start now. It starts at the time that those individuals were building relationships and making family decisions. Those family decisions are now affecting the way that they live today. It doesn't mean that we say, okay, well, that's a matter for you. It means that the investment that we make, the policies that we come up with, probably start at a different place. You know, when I worked in the UN system, it was called UNIFEM at the time, had a program called Share the Care. And it was really just about helping families understand that care responsibility is everyone's concern. Yeah, it is women and men and communities sharing care responsibility in ways that they can manage.
You all remember has 2 more minutes.
And, thank you, sir. And I like to think, when I look across the last 30 years of family evolution in Barbados, that programs like that have had an impact. I don't know what the numbers say in the studies that are done in the Ministry of People Empowerment, but anecdotally, it seems to me that there are many more fathers and other custodians of children and others who need care that are taking on that responsibility. And so these issues that are represented in this policy, sir, on aging are not just issues about aging. They're issues about our social structures and our values and what we choose to invest in. And how that investment in care is actually productive. It's not just that households are consuming the money that we spend on care. It is that those investments help people, allow people to continue to meet their full productive capacity. So, sir, just like the policy on population, just like the financial measures that we've taken, where this government has determined that there will be a 50% tax credit on elderly care facilities and hospices. Sir, that is what I mean by policy coherence. So it is not just on in the Ministry of People Empowerment, it's not just in the Ministry of Community Development, it's not just in the Ministry of Finance. All across government, we are looking to see how we are able to invest in a common understanding and implementation of the things that matter to Barbadians. And so, sir, I wholeheartedly support this policy, but beyond that, I also wholeheartedly support the call that has been made for us to continue having this very important national conversation and to identify the ways in which each of us can and must take responsibility for every sector of our population, including and especially the elderly who have brought us here, on whose shoulders we stand, who have brought this Barbados to this place in our development, and to whom we have a clear responsibility. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.